Welcome to the School of Travel's podcast. I'm your host, Becky Gillespie, and each week I bring you stories of how travel can truly change your life if you take the chance to get out on the road and step out of your comfort zone. My guests also share travel tips and lessons they've learned along the way, which I hope inspires you to let travel be your teacher. Hello, listeners. I hope you've had a great week, and thank you for joining me for episode 2. My first interview with a couple, Briana and John, who I met while traveling in Bulgaria this past summer. And I think you're really going to enjoy Briana and John's story about how they met while both of them were digital nomads, also how they save money while traveling around the world through house sitting. Also, you're going to hear some surprising things that they must bring with them while on the road. Now, it's interesting because our first episode, we had a very experienced traveler looking back on how he got started. And in this episode, you're going to hear about how Briana is actually now a very experienced traveler, but John has only been traveling since last year internationally. So I hope you enjoy this story, and here is my interview with Briana and John. Welcome to episode 2 of the School of Travel's podcast, and today I am joined by Briana and John, who I have met here at Co-working Bonsko. Thank you for coming today, guys.
Thanks for having us.
I'm really excited to hear your travel stories because, as you know, as I've explained to you guys, this podcast is about, how we take our travel journeys from basically zero to now. Like, when did you become interested in travel? What was it that interested you in travel? And how did that make your life go in different directions and maybe change your worldview once you started traveling? So I'd like to start, who should I start with?
You should definitely start with her.
Okay. Why? Why do you say that, John?
Because she's much more experienced than I am.
All right.
So, yeah, I feel like I'm really riding her coattails.
Interesting.
As far as travel goes.
I'm so excited to jump into your stories. Okay, so how about Briana? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from South Carolina. And I've been traveling and working remotely for about 5 years now. Prior to that, I was living and working in New York City. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, how long I've been traveling and a little bit of what I was doing before that. My background is in marketing.
Okay, so that's what you majored in college?
I majored in journalism, but yeah, I went kind of hand in hand, went straight into working in marketing after college.
Gotcha. And how about you, John?
I'm also from South Carolina. It has nothing to do with how we know each other.
I'm excited for that story.
Yeah. I went to college in South Carolina. I also have a degree in journalism. I also lived in New York at the same time as her, but also has nothing to do with how we know each other.
What?
We didn't know each other then. And I'm a programmer, which I feel like is the easiest remote working job. It's the profession that lends itself most cleanly and easily to remote work.
Is that what you studied in college?
I did 2 years of computer science, and then I switched to a design program within the School of Journalism at the University of South Carolina.
So you graduated with the journalism degree,
Yeah.
but had a pretty solid foundation.
Yeah. I had a programming job in college too. So programming during the day, and then programming in school, and then programming at night with work got old really fast. And so design was a good complementary skill. And so, I switched into that world.
Did you start programming right after college, basically as your main job?
Yeah. I mean, I had that figured out really even before I got to college. My dad teaches computer science at the community college level and now at the high school level. So I was kind of born into it more or less, I guess.
Lucky.
Yeah.
My family, I have to say, we're all
so.
pretty computer illiterate. So it's you guys. It sounds like you have really come a long way since being born in South Carolina and now sounds like gone all over the world. So I'm really curious, like if we go way back, When do you feel like you first got interested in travel? Or what do you feel like may have led you to do something like move to New York, first of all, Briana?
Yeah, for me, I've always been interested in travel from a young age. My first trip abroad was in high school with a high school French teacher, and that's actually the whole reason I decided to study French instead of Spanish, which is probably what would have been much more useful. But I knew our high school French teacher took the French students to France, and the Spanish teacher didn't go on any trips with her students. So when I had a choice of studying French or Spanish, it was French, because I knew that would get me on a trip abroad. So I've just always been fascinated with learning about other cultures and just how other people's day-to-day lives vary, and other people's traditions. So that's always been fascinating for me, from high school onward, I would say.
Wow. So was that your first trip abroad?
That was my first trip abroad, and then I did a couple of study abroads in college. Wow. After that.
Where were those?
The first one was in India.
Wow.
And it was a summer program, so it was on the shorter side. But yeah, I wanted to go somewhere that was as different as possible from anywhere I'd ever been, and India was a great way to kind of dive into another culture, and also to be able to do that with a group, and have some teachers there who are super familiar with it and could show us around. That was a great way to see India. And the second one was to Hungary.
Oh, wow. Okay. I just know with India, I've been to India myself a couple of times, and I know that it's in the travel community, it's always seen as one of the biggest challenges. So to do that at such a young age, it's like I think you're definitely a brave person. Yeah,
I'm glad that I went there with the group, and I'd go back now, but back then I was a really green traveler, and I think it helped to start off with those school trips in the beginning, and I think especially doing something like India from the get-go, it was easier then in the future to imagine doing other trips on my own.
Wow. And how about you, John?
I feel like my story is kind of the opposite. I didn't really travel much growing up, other than little family vacations within the United States.
Were you always really interested when the summer vacation was coming up? Like, yes, we're going here.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But more just because it wasn't school or whatever. And I was like, maybe from like the moment that I got to college until the end of college, I was singularly focused on moving to New York City and working at a firm as a programmer.
Why did you want to move to New York? I know we didn't talk about that with Briana.
I think just because I grew up in South Carolina, maybe.
Oh.
Like just growing up in a really small place, all you think about is how cool it would be to not be in a really small place. And so, I was just interested in the whole startup scene and didn't necessarily want to go all the way out to San Francisco. And, it was just my singular focus. Every job I took in college, everything I studied, that was the goal. And so I graduated from college and moved there and got a job pretty quickly and easily. And it was awesome for 3 to 5 or 6 months, and kind of after the sheen wore off and like
part you've seen in the movies.
Yeah. After you get used to stuff, I just kind of realized I don't hate this, but it's not. I guess I'd set the expectations so high that it was almost impossible to live up to them. And the same thing with my job. Beanbag chairs and beers, keg every Friday, and all this stuff was cool, but I didn't feel like I was doing particularly meaningful work. It was a great company and great people, and they were all very nice, but I didn't feel like I was really doing anything meaningful. And so after just shy of 2 years of that, I quit and just started taking on client work. The same kind of work, but just working for myself instead of working for someone else. And so then I didn't really think of it as traveling at the time, but I was just traveling within the United States for like long periods of time. So like I lived in the mountains in North Carolina for 3 months.
Where were you staying at this point? Were you staying in hotels? Because I feel like maybe Airbnb wasn't a thing yet.
I was kind of living more long term in places.
Like renting for a few months at a time.
Yeah, or years at a time. So like when I left New York, I went to the middle of nowhere outside of Boone, North Carolina with another programmer. And we lived in a cabin on top of a mountain for 3 months. He was also working remotely. Wow. And then I moved to Austin, Texas for 2 years. That opportunity just kind of came up. A friend I knew from New York was going. So I went there. And let's see.
Then Denver.
Yeah, then Denver. There was a very brief stop at a commune in Virginia.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it was very brief. And then Denver. And then while I was in Denver, I went to visit New Orleans briefly, and that's where I met Briana. And she was like really traveling, like abroad, and I'd never really been outside of the United States. But I met her, and we kind of had similar life situations, but she was just really taking advantage of it, and I wasn't really.
Did you feel like that you were very impressed by her when you heard her travel stories, or?
Yeah. I mean, she was just doing the stuff that I knew I could have been doing, but I just had not been. I had the situation to do it, but I just hadn't been traveling anywhere abroad. I didn't really know how to start or anything like that. And so after we met, then I just had to pay for half.
And she was the planner?
She did all the planning. I mean, that's still how it is.
More than happy to do all the planning.
You love it?
I love that part of it
fantastic.
Almost as much as the travel itself.
Well, I've got some things for you to plan too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's always something that I think a lot of people do love, but there's a lot of us that don't.
Yeah, I don't.
For sure. Yeah.
So can I ask? So I want to ask as well. How did you guys meet in New Orleans?
We met through a dating app, and
cool.
I was living there at the time for 5 months, pet sitting.
Oh, okay. Saving money
which
on
is part of.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
And we've done that quite a lot together since then. It's a great way to, especially if you're traveling long term, to have the chance to stay somewhere for a little while.
For free?
For free, yeah. We pet sit for free in exchange for free accommodation. And there are a lot of like websites and stuff out there that can match you sitters with homeowners. But that's what brought me to New Orleans originally. And then you were just there for a long weekend visiting, and we connected, and we're both working remotely at the time.
That is so cool.
Pretty much started traveling together shortly thereafter.
Yeah. I was really just going to visit my mom. And my mom's in South Carolina. She had a work conference in New Orleans. And you're allowed to bring your spouse, but my dad couldn't go. And so I was in Denver, and she calls me and says, "You want to take your dad's spot on this thing and eat and drink and hang out in New Orleans for free for 4 days or so?" And so I said, yes, of course. And then she's like, "By the way, you probably want to find some stuff to do because I'm going to be busy with work stuff." And so naturally I start looking at the online dating stuff and met her, and we just happened
to grow up 2 hours away from each other.
Right.
And also had lived and worked in New York at the same the same time period. So
were you even in the same part of New York when you were there?
I mean,
I was in Queens. You were
in Brooklyn,
and we both worked in Manhattan, I guess. But
Wow. It's like meant to happen. I'm sure that you felt that way when you finally figured out everything in common.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like our lifestyle situations had more to do with it than like where we happen to be from. Because I don't think there's really like a lot of people. I've never met anyone else from South Carolina that lives like this.
Really?
So yeah, it's not really like a breeding ground for people like us, seems like. So yeah, I feel like us being from us growing up 2 hours apart from each other has the least to do with us being together. Really, it's convenient during the holidays.
That would be a big, huge bonus. Being from two different countries and being remote,
Right.
travelers. That's like, okay, let's just make it part of your trip, perhaps.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that part of it. I know it's like a little personal, but I
No.
love your story. So, okay, I know that travel has led you to find your current partner, which is a life-changing thing. But how else would you say, like, finally getting out there? And John, you may have even more to say about this because you weren't traveling as far and wide at first. But how has travel changed you, would you say? I'll start with you, Briana.
I think, especially traveling at first, solo, really taught me a lot about myself and about being independent and getting really comfortable in a situation where there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, and just being not afraid to go alone to another country where you might not speak the language and trust that you'll be able to figure your way around and figure out how everything works. And also just little stuff like getting comfortable if you're traveling alone, just going into a restaurant or a bar by yourself. And
how did you do it the first time? How did you feel like you could get comfortable doing that? Because that is like a huge fear for so many, especially women.
Definitely. And like walking around alone at night if you're traveling alone. But I think, being in a new place, you want to make the most of it. And so I think I really would have felt like I hadn't made the most of it if I had just stayed in my Airbnb or only stuck to the hostel and not gone out and explored on my own. So I think, I don't know, I was very motivated to try and make the most of the experience wherever I happened to be. And sometimes that meant like I really wanted to go eat at this restaurant or try this food or see this place, and sometimes that meant I had to go alone. And but I'm so glad that I feel comfortable doing that now. And I think the only way to feel comfortable doing that is to try it once and then maybe try it again, a little more extreme the next time, and then you'll just get used to it and it'll be normal.
How do you deal with having dinner alone? Because I find that to be one of the hardest things as you transition to solo travel.
Yeah, bring a book. Don't be scared to like talk to other people. I think, we're really reliant on just absorbing ourselves in our phone and not really taking a look at what's happening around us or who else is around us and who you might be able to engage with or what you might be able to observe.
Wow.
So I think that just being aware of what's around you and not kind of just staring into the screen can present a lot of opportunities to meet people or just make funny observations that you might have missed otherwise.
That's cool. I will say the first time I did that, I did have my phone. And I was just using it as like my crutch the first time.
Yeah, totally. The first few times do it with your phone. The next few times try to put the phone away, at least for part of it. And yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, sounds like you're now quite a confident solo traveler.
Yeah. It took many years of getting used to it, but then it was hard to switch to traveling with people after that. Not you specifically, but like, when you get used to, when you know how you like to travel and when kind of what you would do. And then, you know, you're traveling with a group or with a friend that has different interests or a different travel style. You know, then you realize, oh, it is actually kind of nice when you travel alone and you just get to set your own agenda. And
it's a different skill set, perhaps, too,
Yeah.
would be able to travel successfully with one other person, I think. But it also, I would say, it would really help to build a relationship. Because if you can travel together, you can do anything together, right?
Totally.
So how about you, John? Like, how would you say travel has changed you?
I would say maybe I don't know yet. I've really only been doing this since like last summer. We spent like 5 months of last year in Mexico, and that was really my first time traveling outside the U.S.
Wow.
And you know, now we're here. We've been in Europe for 2 months, a little more than that now. So you know, really, I don't even have like a full year of travel under my belt. I don't have any solo travel experience, so you know.
Would you like to travel by yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I would rather travel alone than not travel, but I like having a crutch.
You mean a planner?
No,
Well,
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that we are able to, when we're traveling together, have a different kind of experience and different opportunities come along when you have two people instead of one. So there is a difference between traveling alone, which is amazing, and traveling with a partner, which is equally amazing, but can bring different opportunities your way. Like when I was traveling solo, I was mainly sticking to larger cities that had a public transportation system, so it would be easy for me to get around on my own. And cities are just easier for you to be independent in as like a solo person. But now that we're traveling together, we've been able to go to a lot more remote type places. Like we just spent last month on a mountaintop in Spain, in a kind of remote, completely off-grid location, which was an amazing experience. But I don't think I would have wanted to do that by myself, and I don't think the homeowners would have taken a single person. They were really looking for a couple.
Well, and they definitely wouldn't have taken a person that couldn't drive a stick shift.
Yeah, that too.
I can't drive one.
A lot of opportunities come with thanks to his
That's the only
driving
time.
skills.
That's the only time I'm useful, is if there's
I'm sure
the
that's
only
not true, John.
transportation is a stick shift vehicle. Then I'm able to be useful.
I have to say,
So-
listeners, learn how to drive a stick shift if you can, because I've come
So
across a lot of
helpful, yeah.
roadblocks traveling, you know, globally. Yeah, it's still, and it's more expensive to rent an automatic
Yeah.
as well. Well, how did it feel when you did go to Mexico that first time? You finally left the States. Was it?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I had a really great time. We had some really awesome living situations.
And you just dived right in. Like your first time ever going abroad, we were gone for 5 months.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that would have been more intimidating if I were alone. But I didn't have to be. But yeah, and it was also like not, especially when we were in San Miguel, we were house sitting in San Miguel, and I'm practically like a mansion, like these old people from this retired couple from the United States who were going back home. So we weren't really roughing it.
Nice.
we had a really great situation there, so I eased into it.
In a mansion.
Yeah. But then immediately after that went to like a much more
remote, like small fishing village type of place, and so we got to see many different sides of Mexico, going to these different cities, staying about a month in each place.
This sounds so cool. I would like to try this. I've never pet sitted or house sitted, but again, I'm traveling solo, so
It could be great. Yeah.
Well,
we've loved it.
I'm assuming this is probably going to be true for you as well, but like pretty much our biggest expense by far is rent.
Oh yes,
right?
same.
I mean, unless you've got really expensive taste in food or something,
Sometimes.
you there's not many things that are going to cost you hundreds of dollars every month. And if you can just erase that expense with house sitting, I mean,
can
it's
travel
definitely
a lot more
worth
affordably.
it. And I think you end up doing things that you wouldn't have otherwise done. So like where we just were in Spain, we were living in like a completely off the grid house on the side of a mountain that this couple from the UK like built themselves, and it was a really amazing place. But I don't think if you were just
in Spain looking for if you had to rent a place,
right,
we probably would have even come across that town.
Yeah, you wouldn't organically come across it if you were just looking at backpacking situations, or I think I feel like we kind of used house sitting as a way to have something to plan around. So like we'll find a house sit that's awesome and interesting, and then if we have time before that, so that's what we did on this trip. We had the house sit in Spain, and then we had like a month before then, and so we went to Lisbon.
Because it was close enough.
It was close.
Nearby.
We found a cheap place to stay there. And so we did Lisbon, then we did the house sit, and then we kind of wanted to come to Eastern Europe. We're already over here.
I'm glad you guys did.
And that's how we ended up here.
So were you working in the small fishing village in Spain that was off the grid, it sounds like? Was there Wi-Fi?
There was. There was amazing Wi-Fi. It was better than the Wi-Fi we had in Lisbon.
Whoa.
Yeah.
They had satellite Wi-Fi. They did say they had just upgraded their Wi-Fi service.
I was assuming
it was impressive.
You had to deal with that whole issue, but wow,
that's
the best
one
of both
thing
worlds.
we have to double check with every house sit before we commit is, do you have reliable Wi-Fi? Because if there was any sort of deal breaker for us, that would be it, unfortunately. It's nice to be disconnected, every once in a while, but for us that could only be if we were on vacation.
I think oftentimes the people that own these houses are sometimes, like older people who like might not be as addicted to the internet. So we do have to always really make sure. But the people we were just staying with, I mean, they were kind of like building a business in the UK from Spain. I mean, they were very savvy, older folks.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they weren't Luddites or anything.
Sounds fascinating. I'm going to look more into this.
Definitely. Trusted House Sitters is the website that we use most frequently. I mean, it's basically set up very similarly to Airbnb, where you have a profile, the homeowners have a profile, you look through listings, and then you message someone if you see a sit that you're interested in.
And it costs, how much does it cost?
It costs $120 a year for membership. So even if you get one as a sitter, if you sign up as a sitter, if you do one house sit that's any longer than 3 or 4 nights, it's paid for.
Yeah.
It's more than paid for itself.
That seems like a lot of money for a website. I mean, I guess it is.
Website membership, yeah.
But as long as you use it once, I mean.
And $10 a month sounds better than $120.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
And we split that. So
As a couple. Economies of scale.
Yeah.
And I would say this is great to know because there's so many people that have homes in the U.S., for example, that love pets, and that's one reason they don't travel so much is they have pets. But here's a way that they can travel, have someone watch their pets, or it's a way to save money when they do want to travel.
Exactly.
Abroad, because it's so expensive, I can't, But
and a lot of people do both.
Around.
Like these homeowners that we just sat for in Spain, when they go back to the UK, where they're originally from, they house sit. So they have house sitters while they're off house sitting. And we've met several couples that do both.
That's
we
brilliant.
would do both if we had a house, but
Yeah.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Yeah. Well, thank you for this tip. I think it would be, helpful for people who are just looking to travel further to finally get out and start doing it, For those people that are nervous, that are like, they feel overwhelmed, they've maybe always had a place they want to go, but they just won't do it, or it just stays on the list because of X, Y, and Z. What would you tell those people that are scared or that feel overwhelmed, especially, let's say, with like international travel?
Mm-hmm. I think taking baby steps is a good way. Do something to get your feet wet, like go and visit a friend that's living abroad. I did that a few times before I ever did any true solo travel.
What if you didn't have that? Growing up, I definitely didn't. I knew one person from the UK,
mm-hmm.
and they were my age, so they didn't live there either. They was from there.
I think another thing people could consider if they don't know someone living abroad that they could go visit would be to either try couch surfing or try finding a community like co-working Bansko, maybe one of the co-living, co-working groups like Wi-Fi Tribe, and that way they can travel to a place internationally that still has somewhat of a built-in community. Or if you're going to go couch surf, you have a host that's there that you're staying with that can show you around.
I know some of my friends back home, they say that is so dangerous to couch surf, and if they've never traveled, I think it might seem very scary
to do that on your first trip. Yeah. My first time couch surfing, I was actually visiting a friend who was teaching English in Seoul, South Korea, but the apartments are so small there that she couldn't, like, there literally wasn't room for a second person in her little studio apartment. It was so tiny. So I went to go visit her, but I couldn't stay with her. So then I did couch surfing, knowing that, there is someone that I know in this city. I'm really here to visit her. So if something goes terribly wrong with couch surfing, I have this other connection in that I can contact. I have somewhere to go if things go totally awry. So I think doing things like that, if you can, if you know someone, or if you want to try couch surfing for the first time but you're a little nervous, do it in a city where you know other people.
That's a great tip. Yeah. John, do you have any tips for people that are really scared or hesitant?
Find a significant other that already knows everything.
Where do you suggest that they find the dating apps?
No, there's a guy who is here at Bansko who started Nomad Soulmates.
Oh,
I think
really?
nomadsoulmates.com.
So people that are always traveling,
I think so.
they can find people?
I think so.
Okay.
So maybe check that website out.
All right.
Yeah.
Is there an app for that?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like all about, like, maybe I haven't learned any good lessons because, like, nothing bad has happened to me yet. Yeah.
That's a good thing, right? That's
it's going. I mean, I guess a couple things, but I would say if you want to do this, long term, like make it a lifestyle thing, get your work situation straight. I mean, I was fortunate that I'd already had lots of clients, and, my financial situation was more or less already worked out. But, like, all of this would be much more stressful if I had to think, oh God, if I don't find another client this month, I'm going to have to go home, or I'm going to have to... So, whether you have to save for a little while, or whether you just have to finally get serious about whatever your business is, all of this would be much harder if you had to constantly worry about your finances. We also just travel really cheap. But
do you cook at home a lot as well?
We cook a lot at home. Yeah, we're not eating out a lot. We don't have a very extravagant lifestyle at all.
I feel like you don't need one when you get a chance to travel as often as it sounds
That's
like
so
you guys.
true.
It's
That's
like
so true.
your
You're just your every day just simply because you're in a new place, doing everyday things is exciting because it's new, and through, you know, very mundane things like going to the grocery store or you know, getting a beer after work. You're kind of getting a cultural experience, even though you're not necessarily doing anything special because you're doing it in a new place. It is special.
Your like favorite thing to do in a new place is go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the meat gonna be like here? What is the
do they refrigerate the eggs or do they not? You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, little stuff like the walk from here at the co-working space to our apartment. There's like a beautiful mountain view the entire walk. You know.
I'm gonna miss that a lot. When
Yeah.
I leave.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
I think our listeners like hearing all these experiences, even if they're not like working for themselves or anything at all, just hearing the possibilities and the opportunities that they have when they start to look at the big wide world is really inspiring. So yeah. Well, okay, now I'm gonna ask. This is a bit of a lightning round. So okay, Briana, I'm gonna ask you. This is so hard as well. What is the best trip that you think one of the best trips you've ever had of all the travel that you've done? It's coming to you next, John. Just a little heads up there.
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. It's really hard to pick. Okay, if I just the first thing that comes to mind is it's actually it was going to visit my friend in Moldova.
Where is that?
That is between Romania and the Ukraine.
Okay.
And I say that just because it was the trip where everything went wrong. But ultimately everything worked out in the end, but it turned into like a really great story. But we had issues with like they wouldn't let us get a visa if we were arriving by train, only if we went by car or plane. So we had to get off the train in the middle of the night in Romania. We had to like hitchhike across the border. Then we realized we didn't have enough money to buy the visas, so my friend had to leave and go back into Romania to get money, come back over. It was like a whole ordeal. Our friend in Moldova was waiting for us at the train station and we never showed up. And we finally got in touch with her to tell her what happened, and she met us at the border. And then we hitchhiked with an Austrian couple who was RVing around Europe back to Chisinau to finally get there like 8 hours later.
Were there any tears involved at any point?
A lot.
Okay. I know I'd be crying.
It was, but some of your most horrific travel stories end up being, the favorite stories to tell after enough time has passed that you can look back and laugh.
Yeah, and you're still here with us, so
exactly.
Hey, guys, it could get scary, but it sticks out in your mind at that point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had anything quite like that happen.
It was an adventure, but we got where we were going, and we had a great time once we finally got there.
Was this like before the days of the internet being?
This was pre-smartphone.
Okay, because I feel like now, like, it is a lot easier to find the visa information you need way before you get anywhere near that border. So
exactly, yeah. I think it was partly we were like pretty inexperienced travelers at that point, and also without smartphones. Part of a lot of my stress was like my friend left and was inexplicably gone for hours when I thought they would have been back. Would have only taken like a couple hours, and there was no way for us to communicate. So like now that would have been no big deal because you just send a text message or a Facebook message or whatever. But
yeah, travel, I mean, nowadays it seems there's less and less excuses to just get out there,
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, John, how about you?
I really loved where we just came from in Langeron, Spain, because I think the people who we were house sitting for we're living a lifestyle that I ultimately want for myself. You know, they're totally off grid.
Growing their own food.
Growing their own food. I mean, we could pick a salad out of the dirt. You know, we had a great dog. All the power came from the sun, and the water came from up the mountain through this like Atheca system built by the Romans, and it was just a really cool experience. And yeah, I think I saw people doing. I got to live in someone's shoes that I want to live in permanently at some point. And so, you know,
there's like no better education than that.
Yeah.
Is there?
Yeah.
Much
It was
better
awesome.
than a book, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Wow.
Totally.
I need to house sit here. I'm gonna get the details later.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, here's another lightning round question, and I'm gonna explain this a little bit. I'm gonna start with you, John.
Okay.
So, what 3 things do you feel that you cannot travel without these days? And I want to say specialty items that maybe that you definitely pack, but it might be helpful for someone to hear.
Okay.
They should take this.
Well, maybe this isn't a good answer, but my computer.
Okay.
Is that a fair?
It's not a specialty item.
That's
It's
not
not
a specialty item at
item?
this point because it's
Right.
it's been a common
Okay,
answer.
specialty item.
Yeah, like for example, me, I always have to pack my head torch or my headlight because I spend time in hostels and I'm like rifling through in the middle of the night trying to find things while people are sleeping. Something like that.
Well, she just whispered basketball at me. But that's
You
not
buy
even.
one. You buy
I was
one
gonna
in
say
every city
that's
we
not
go
even
to.
necessarily true because
So cool.
a basketball is the most inconvenient thing to travel with.
I would agree with
And
that.
so-
I'm shocked by the.
Yeah, and so I have left more basketballs at random places because you can't really fly with one. It doesn't go in a bag.
Do you give them to like kids on a court?
I'll leave them in an apartment, or I'll throw them over the fence onto a basketball court.
It's cool.
And just leave. I mean, somebody will pick it up or something. But I'm particularly upset about this right now because I bought a basketball in Plovdiv because I didn't know if I was going to be able to get one here, and then I left it.
Oh, and you can't get one here?
Well, I did find one, and it's the same exact one, but I didn't even use the old one.
Oh.
I didn't.
John.
Anyway, I'm veering off of your question, but yeah, basketball, I guess, but I don't even really travel with it. I just pick one up
Yeah, it sounds
wherever
like
I go. Maybe my mechanical keyboard. I've got a keyboard that I'm really fond of.
Like for your computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't have too many specialty items.
Why do you like that keyboard? Is it designed a certain way or?
Yeah, it just feels really nice to type on.
All right, interesting.
Your cord case.
Oh yeah.
Travels with a lot of cords.
Yeah, I've got a lot of little gadgets and stuff, and I've got just bought this great little bag. It's just got a lot of little cord. I don't know how to explain it
Kind of
in
like
words.
a cord organizer.
Yeah,
Bag.
yeah.
Keep things from getting tangled up and things.
Yeah, and again, I don't know that this is a specialty item, but the thing I am most obsessed with is my bag itself. Like the backpack that I travel with.
That is a specialty item. I mean, that's.
I guess so.
That's
Yeah.
important. Which
But
bag?
It's
Did you find something you
it's
like?
an Osprey Farpoint 55.
Okay.
And it's got like a regular pack for all your stuff, and then it has a detachable day pack, which I use for like my laptop and stuff.
That is super
And
handy.
I think part of why I'm so obsessed with it is because when we were in Mexico, I traveled with like 2 super old duffel bags. And it was just not good. And so when Christmas rolled around, that was the only thing that I asked for was a new a new backpack, and I got it, and I couldn't be more pleased. I actually met a guy here at the co-working space that has the same one, and he was like, "Oh, I'm obsessed with this backpack too." So
I have to say, I just bought a
all the
bag.
difference.
I got a bag in May. It's the Tortuga. I think it's called the Outbreaker. It's a 45 liter, but it doesn't have a detachable bag. You can buy one separately, and so I'm using my other bag is like this old, like collapsible bag I use for hiking, but it's not super convenient to do it that way.
I couldn't recommend that bag enough. I mean, if you Google, best digital nomad backpacks, that one's almost always at the top of the list, and like people were right. She's got a great bag too, but I feel like you're kind of jealous of mine.
All right, well,
I know my bags very well, so
I'm gonna look that one up too. You guys are teaching me a lot. Love this. Okay, Briana, how about you? Let's go.
So I was thinking about this, and the things that I didn't used to travel with the first few years that I've now had to add back into the mix are all things that you would have at your apartment, but that you can't necessarily always count on being provided at wherever you're renting. So like you can always expect at an Airbnb, if you have a kitchen, you're gonna have like certain things like plates, and you'll usually have a towel provided to you wherever you stay. But I've had to start traveling with a hairdryer again.
I just bought one.
Because enough times I needed a hairdryer and didn't have one, and it's the worst, especially if you have long hair and it's cold out, to not have one.
I just got tired of my hair always looking the same. I have to say I haven't been using it very much in Bonsco, but...
Yeah, so hair dryer is something I used to think I didn't need, and then enough times I really, really wished I had one. So I found a super tiny one, the tiniest one on Amazon, and it's great. It fits right in the bag.
Do you have like a dual converter, or like you made sure it's gonna be all right in several countries?
Yeah, I think I looked into that.
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't had any troubles with it yet. So far so good. Also an AeroPress.
Oh.
So you can't always count on having a coffee maker. A lot of times you have a coffee maker. Sometimes you don't. And we're big coffee drinkers. It's the first thing we do when we get up in the morning. And so it's painful if you're staying somewhere and don't have a coffee maker. So the AeroPress, again, is like really tiny and compact. And
that is a good tip.
We're using it here because here in Bansko, we have a great apartment, but it doesn't have a coffee maker, so it's perfect use case. And a combination wine beer opener, because also a lot of times
those exist.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen those.
They do, because a lot of times you'll have silverware and stuff in the kitchen, but you won't have a wine opener.
Oh, I've definitely been out on the street looking for the nearest convenience store for the wine opener. And then it got taken from me at a different airport because I didn't check it.
Oh.
I don't know if you've ever had issues with your...
No, I've been carrying... That's good to know because it's been in my carry-on, but I should probably throw it in my
It was just
baggage.
One country. I just hit the wrong country, and it was in Chile, actually. So, yeah, that's definitely handy.
Well, and you mentioned you normally get towels where we stay.
Sometimes you don't.
But we both travel with towels now.
Yeah, if you get you found some great microfiber towels that fold up really small.
And they're not as good as a regular towel. But
it's better than finding yourself with no towel. Unexpectedly.
Drying yourself with a scarf like I've done before.
Right.
Yeah, I've done that too.
Yeah.
So that's worth the space.
I got a bigger... Did you guys go from smaller towels to bigger towels? Because I actually ended up doing that. The same microfiber, but I...
Really?
I guess ours are about normal towel size, maybe. But they're just really, really thin.
Yeah. I did decide, at least almost the size of your body is better than a hand towel.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I think, in general, things that are hard to find, or you have to go to some specialty shop once you get there to find.
That's why we started.
That's always tricky, because if you're in a new place, you don't know where to shop.
I do
for
not
those
know where to
things.
find my headlight. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
they're very expensive in hiking shops around
There's
the world.
there's not a Walmart to just go to where there's everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't order off Amazon, most of the time. So
Well, I have one more question for you guys. Would you like to travel to next? Have you already got your next house sit or pet sit set up, or?
we don't. We have nothing planned after Bansko.
We have nothing planned after where we are right
You're
now.
gonna be here for 3 months?
We could be.
Quite
We
possibly.
Gonna
could
hit your
be.
visa limit?
I mean, I think we left it open purposefully because
Yeah.
we felt like this might be somewhere that we might want to extend our stay. And talking with a lot of the other people at the space, it seems like they extended once they got here, and we're very happy that they did.
It seems like if you said to your landlord here you wanted to stay for another month, they're not going to have like someone beating down the door to get in your apartment. Like, there's plenty of rooms in this town.
That's what I've noticed as well.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
We didn't have to be too worried about getting kicked out of our apartment as soon as our lease is up or anything. So.
But I think
But you're
beyond
right.
possibly.
You're ready to go back to Asia, bad, right?
Yeah, it's
Hey,
been
come
like
to
3
Tokyo.
or 4 years
I've never
since
been.
I've been
so.
to Asia, so I'd love to get back to Southeast Asia. I'd like to do more of South America.
Yeah.
We've been wanting to go to Medellin.
Mm-hmm.
I was just there in May, and I would really recommend it.
Yeah.
To you guys. Yeah. Well, yeah. If you have questions for me, let me know.
Yeah,
so
I'd love to
exciting.
hear more about it.
Well, where can we go if we want to find out more about you, or if we want to see some of your travel photos?
I'm on Twitter at @Briana and
Is that with one
Instagram.
N or
with one N.
Okay,
Mhm.
Briana.
And just the letter G.
Okay.
And my Instagram is Briana Pudding.
With 2 D's.
Yes.
Okay.
Like banana pudding, but
All right.
I'm JH Sheridan everywhere. JHSHERIDAN. Instagram, Twitter, .com, wherever.
Clever. Handy.
Yeah.
smart and easy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your travel
Thank
stories
you.
with me.
Yeah.
And I hope this inspires, I'm sure it will, many people to get on the road and try, for example, pet sitting or house sitting.
Yes,
I know
try
I'm
it.
going
Yeah.
to. You guys have inspired
I
me.
feel like that's
so.
our biggest takeaway or biggest thing to tell anyone else. Like, you got to try the house sitting thing if you haven't, because it's great. And we've met a lot of cool people we wouldn't have otherwise, and just done stuff that we wouldn't have, I don't think.
And I think there's something about having pets as well. Like,
Yes.
with you.
It's a
That
big,
it's a big comfort on the
it's
road.
a big plus.
Yeah. Well, hope you guys have a great day and enjoy the rest of your time in Bansko.
Thank you.
Thank
We will.
you.
I really hoped you enjoyed that interview with Briana and John as much as I did, listeners, especially what they had to say about house sitting, because I had previously thought if you were a solo traveler, it was almost impossible to get a job house sitting. But Briana makes it sound possible, and I definitely want to look further into that, and I encourage you guys to do the same. We're also going to put links to what they mentioned as their packing items in the show notes, so if you're interested in the AeroPress or the Osprey backpack, have a look at that. And as I did last week, listeners, and I do have a weakness for travel quotes, I'd like to leave you with a new travel quote today. This is by one of my favorite travel writers, Pico Iyer, and Iyer is spelled Iyer. Pico has written more than 8 travel books about various places around the world, including one of my favorites called The Lady and the Monk, where he goes to Japan to study Buddhism in Kyoto, and then other things happen that he does not expect. He also has given 2 TED Talks, one called The Beauty of What We'll Never Know, and another called Where is Home? So check those out if you're interested. And now I'm going to leave you with this beautiful quote from Pico Iyer. We travel initially to lose ourselves, and we travel next to find ourselves. We travel to open our hearts and eyes and learn more about the world than our newspapers will accommodate. We travel to bring what little we can, in our ignorance and knowledge, to those parts of the globe whose riches are differently dispersed. and we travel in essence to become young fools again, to slow time down and get taken in, and fall in love once more. Have a great week, listeners, and we look forward to you joining us next week. Thank you for listening to the School of Travels podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on iTunes. Special thanks to The Sam Chase for allowing us to use their song, In a Perfect World. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode, and remember to always let travel be your teacher.
If you keep your options open, there are places you will go. They will treat you like the kings and queens your parents thought you'd be when you were born. You'd see it all with your head up standing tall, and you'd look back and think it's funny how you spent your time and